Should we start? Yeah. Oh, that works great. Oh, it's like you're going to kill me. Hey guys, welcome. This is odd to me. There's a mic right in front of me. I feel like a stand-up comic. I'm not. But a joke? No, I can't. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. We really, really appreciate it. So you're here for Social Media Week, Heritage Brands, and we have. I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for being here tonight. I know you have much better things to do, but you chose to spend the time with us, and I promise it'll be a great event. We have panels I think Denise will introduce in a bit, but I just want to tell you a little bit about our space. We are a co-working space. We opened just 3 months ago in what I believe is the best part of downtown LA, Little Tokyo. Aside from that, we have just a great community of people. We're a community of entrepreneurs, freelancers, and just really great people that help each other out and just really work together to really succeed and promote each other's business. So I'm not going to take up too much more time. So let me introduce, we started a little late, so I'm not taking up too much more time. So let me introduce Denise, who will be the panel presenter.
Hi everyone, I'm Denise Garciano, and I am moderating tonight's panel on heritage brands, how brands use social media to tell their story. So I'm actually going to have each of the panelists kind of introduce themselves and kind of their backgrounds and history.
Hey, I'm Nikki Scoggins. I do the social stuff for Vans. I've been with them for about 6 years, and I've been working in action sports for the last decade. That's how I know this girl. That's about it, I think.
My name is Kyle Maurer. I'm the Global Director of Social Media for Guess and the portfolio of brands under Guess Inc. And I've bounced around a little bit, started at Abercrombie, worked at a digital agency, entertainment agency, PMKB&C out here, was at a holding company, Kelwood, that owns brands like Vince and Rebecca Taylor before joining Guess. So a bit of a varied background, but really excited to be in social media now for the long haul.
And hi, I'm Caitlin. I'm the social media director at Tom's, and I've been with them for about 5.5 years. There were like 30 people when I started. I was brought on to manage our founder's MySpace page, and both the brand and social media have kind of, blown up in parallel. So it's been an interesting ride.
Cool. So the first question I kind of want to ask is, a lot of people will probably define like a heritage brand as someone who has history, who has a kind of a story to tell, and probably some rock star music. No, I'm just kidding. But I guess, what is your kind of definition of what a heritage brand is? And maybe if you guys can like sum it up in kind of like 3 words, what would those 3 words be?
Guess I'll start. I think it's, let's see, authenticity, community, and icon, I think.
I'm going to say it's emotion, playing off of community. I think it's time and connection are the 2 big ones as well.
And I'd say I'm bad at choosing 3 words, so I'm going to say a few more than 3 words, but I think it's, having a really strong story to tell, and I think it's longevity, which I think is, for anyone for Tom's to be in the mix on this one, the company's only 7 years old, so I wouldn't say we're quite a heritage brand yet, but hopefully we're laying a foundation to be one, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, and I think those are really well, and I guess emotional connection, I would say, is definitely a strong third. When I think of other heritage brands, I think people really have a strong emotional connection, whether it's because their parents really loved that brand or they have a story about growing up with that brand, but I'd say those 3 things.
So then, I mean, is there a part, you know, Caitlin, you kind of mentioned storytelling, right? So then, is there a particular element when you guys are kind of like telling the story of each of your brands that you are particularly looking for, or you feel like that should be an element that should be had within that storytelling?
I think authenticity is a really important one, but there's so many different layers to storytelling, and I think it's such a simple word, really, and I think it's used around the context of social media so often. It's like, oh, social media is about telling your story, it's storytelling, and it's like, oh, that should be simple. That sounds like it should be such a simple thing to do, but when you bring in all of the different layers of what the different platforms are capable of and what you perceive your brand to be, because you're, you know, controlling so much of what's going out versus what other people perceive your brand to be versus this whole competitive nature of, well, all of these other brands are on Vine, we should be on Vine too, but can we really tell our story there, and what's really important, like being on Mashable for being on Vine or telling a really good story on Vine? It's like all of these challenging things. So I think when it comes down to it, storytelling is a much more challenging practice than it sounds like it is on the surface. And authenticity is a much more challenging practice than it sounds like it is on the surface. And you can't just kind of throw those words around lightly when you're talking about social media strategy or your purpose for your brand being in social media. That could probably be like a whole 6-hour discussion in itself. There's that one word storytelling.
I'm going to echo what Caitlin said. I think that one of the big things about storytelling is when you're telling a story, typically you're trying to invoke a response from somebody. You know, you're telling a scary story around a campfire, you're trying to get people to be scared. If you're telling a story that's supposed to make people feel good, you want them to, smile and feel good about themselves afterwards. And I think in social media, the thing that can get lost sometimes is people want to tell instead of listen. And a lot of times people want to, and I'm not saying people in social media, but I'm sure these two fight internally even sometimes to make sure that we're not just pushing things out to tell the brand side, but that we're trying to invite response or sharing, because that's how stories can grow and mythologize over time when you get the audience involved and it becomes a game of telephone where it takes on a life of its own. And I think that's something that I know at Guess we're constantly trying to balance. How do we get across our point of view, but not in such a way that it's going to blockade anybody from trying to share their point of view, which might run, I wouldn't say counter, but just in a different direction from necessarily what we're talking about, but stay on that same point.
Well, I think that the key thing about storytelling is that you actually have to have a good story. I think I know as marketers, everybody drinks the fucking Kool-Aid, and it's like, oh, my brand is the best thing, and I made the coolest thing. And sometimes you don't, and sometimes it's not. And if it's not, then don't tell a story about that. Tell a story about something that you like that's related to it. Like, something. If you're working with, collaborating with a new partner, and they have some kind of interesting background, or, there's someone at a manufacturer that you met, that has a really cool story. Like, how was your product made? That might be a lot more interesting to your audience than just like, oh, here's your product, here's a photo at the end. So I think that, a story has 3 acts, and if you want somebody to pay attention to it or care about it, make it interesting. And if it's not good, nobody's going to listen to it. So that's that.
So I guess, Nikki, then, like for Vans, you guys have been around for almost nearly 5 decades, right? So, over the years, how do you, not drink the Kool-Aid and kind of like stay relevant, especially with social media, because it's, it's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving. So how do you kind of keep that consistency going for the brand?
A lot of times I tell people that I've done stuff that I didn't actually do because they don't check. Like if it's a product that I don't, and we all know it's not going to work, I'll just, yeah, I did that. They don't look. You just kind of stick with your gut. And I'm lucky in that I'm really supported in what I want to do and the kind of stories that I'm going to tell. As far as doing it over time, I mean, yeah, it evolves, and the kinds of stories that we used to be able to tell, and not for nothing, but the kind of shit that I used to be able to talk on the internet that was so fun that I used to be able to do in 2007 is not what I can do now with the global audience that we have. And so I got to be a little bit more careful about that. But it's still, like, I still want to keep that same humor. I still want to keep that same life and care for what we're pushing out. It doesn't have to be boring, even though we've sized up and more eyeballs are on it. And I think that some brands kind of, like, as you become more successful, of course you become more conservative. You know, you're working on a huge scale, but you gotta remember where your roots are and why people started liking you in the first place. And, you know, if you lose all of that, then, you know, you're just another boring person on the internet shoving buy this in front of people.
I think it's a good point. User behavior and platforms are going to change. Caitlin was talking about it. It constantly is evolving. But the thing you have to keep in mind is that there are core traits to any heritage brand. Like, there are certain things that you have to fall back on, and you have to say that sometimes you're going to be contrarian to what everybody else is, you know, trending towards or what everybody else is doing, and that's okay. You have to accept that that's okay. You know, I know at Guess, when I got there, one of the problems was they were over assorted because they had gone from this jeans brand into having every you know, tchotchke jewelry accessory that you could possibly think of, and then it came to a point where they realized, oh wow, we've really lost sight of what we were in the first place, and now we're trying to go back to that. And I think that's a critical piece, is to understand that there will be things happening that you may or may not be able to adopt, and that's okay. You know, that if you stick to that, people will actually have more respect for you than if you just decide to jump on every bandwagon that comes along.
Well, I mean, you know, Caitlin, I know that you had mentioned that you guys, you want to see Tom's 50 years from now kind of be this brand, right? 1 for 1, right, is such a great program. I mean, it really is something that's telltale of you guys eventually becoming, you know, that heritage brand. How do you kind of see that kind of evolving in terms of paving that direction for you guys in terms of a heritage brand for Tom's?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, even though there's great brand awareness for Tom's, I mean, hopefully you feel like you see them everywhere. I definitely feel like I see Tom's shoes everywhere, and now I'm starting to see the sunglasses on people too. It's like hard to control myself from like running people down and being like, oh my God, where'd you get those? Hi, how are you? I know. Yeah, the first couple of times. And then, you know, some weird internet story pops up about the crazy Tom's people that run you down. No. I think that there is great brand equity, there is great brand awareness. The brand has definitely skyrocketed over the past 5.5 years since I've been there. But I think on a global scale, we're still such a small brand. There's still so much work for us to do just in defining what our voice is, defining who we are, defining the things we really care about, defining how we want to evolve versus the things that need to remain core. I think we felt like we had a really good understanding of that very early on, but then you kind of get to those teenage years where you're like, who am I? and so that's kind of where we are right now, I feel like. And I think a lot of that is like, you know, internal angst too. But I think that's such a far goal for us to be, you know, a heritage brand, or to, you know, I think we definitely have those aspirations, and we definitely are thinking now, you know, what are the things that we can do now to make us relevant, you know, tomorrow, and then 10 years from now, and then 20 years from now. But I think, you know, in a lot of ways, we're still trying to figure out kind of who we are and what foundation we're going to lay. And that's tough. That's a tough phase to be in when you're in social media, because I think, you know, one thing that you absolutely want to stick to, and something that's so important in social media, is consistency. And it's, you know, if you look on Instagram, and people who have really high followings on Instagram, and they're just like those, you know, 500,000, million, 2 million people, and they're just like normal users, they have a certain like look and feel, and they use the same filters. It's like you get used to what you're gonna get from people, and you're following them for that reason. And maybe you're following other people for other reasons, but you have to have that level of consistency. And so when you're still trying to figure out like exactly what our tone and voice is across all of these platforms, and we're still growing so fast, it's a challenge. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I'd say we're still figuring out. But I think that's something you kind of have to surrender to in social media, is that you're always going to be just figuring things out. There's not going to be one day that you wake up and you're like, we got it. It's like you're going to be evolving. You have to be open to change every single day.
And then Kyle, Guess has been around since the 80s, right? And it's such an iconic logo. Like, how does that evolve, like, within social media for, getting people in this generation to kind of understand that kind of, like, heritage and that kind of story behind that logo?
I would say we're in a similar situation, albeit at different stages of life, to Tom's, where there's a large audience that doesn't understand what you just said. That Guess is an iconic brand from the 80s that understands what that logo means, to a certain generation when they saw it. And so we're in the process of trying to figure out how do we do that. And I think it really comes down to two things. You have to reinforce what your filter is. How is your brand going to be put out there to the world the way you want it to be put out there? But then also understand, when it comes to social media especially, what is the user behavior in different channels? How are people actually now sharing social media and using social media to connect? And how can you ride that behavior with your brand filter still intact? Because I think if you can mesh those two things, which is what we're trying to do right now, that's when you can have success. The challenge is, as Caitlin was saying, if you're not consistent, if you're constantly just trying to jump on the latest fad or the latest trend in terms of technology or in terms of how people are using a particular social channel, you'll end up diluting your brand because you're probably not set up to be that way. And so I find myself saying no a lot more now than I do actually saying yes. And it's frustrating, I think, for some of my partners internally, but it's really out of trying to protect the brand. And until we get to a place where everybody in the room is nodding their head and saying this is the direction we're going to go in, I'd rather be more conservative than just go out there and say we're going to shotgun spread it everywhere and see what happens.
I mean, and I think that's the conversation that I've literally had, I think, with each and every one of you guys, is, right, like, how do you prioritize, like, the different platforms? I mean, like, okay, if I could take a poll right now, who here is on Facebook? Raise your hands. Okay. Who here is on Twitter? Okay. Instagram. Pinterest? Vine? Okay. So I mean, with that, now that you guys have kind of seen the spread in terms of, like, everyone who's kind of, like, on the different platforms, and, like, Kyle, you were saying, the user behaviors behind all the different platforms. We know that Facebook and Twitter is kind of like typical, like, go-to kind of like primary platforms. Is there anything that is out there that you guys are using beyond just the kind of like primary platforms, or is that really like kind of where your audience is and where you guys are kind of positioning yourselves?
Facebook, phone book. I don't care. Like, it's fine. It's great for, like, emerging markets, but for the US market, I do not give two shits. I'm sorry. Like, it's so, like, I mean, everybody's on it because they have to be on it. Okay, so who in here actually uses Facebook because they like it and want to use it all the time? Yeah, it's so many of you. Oh my God. That one guy does. James does. Thanks, James. But I mean, and then so look at what, all of us are using different platforms, and you get enjoyment out of different platforms. So I think that, you go and you be where you be where you gotta be, and be there for that audience. But for US, I'm definitely, I like Tumblr and I like Instagram, and actually, like, I've been gaining a lot of traction in the last 6 months again on Twitter. Like, I've seen a lot more activity when it comes to just back and forth banter. I think we gained more than 100,000 new followers in Q1 and Q2 of this year. And it's just because of the kinds of conversations that we were having. And you know, that surprised me. I mean, I thought we'd get a little bump with some changes I made, but like I didn't think it was going to be like that. And I think that, you know, perhaps some other people have some ideas on, you know, what Twitter's doing, but and why that shift would be, because people are leaving Facebook or just, you know, whatever, because of, you know, how much you use Instagram with Twitter. I don't know, but I'm excited about that and Tumblr, really.
I would echo that. I think we've got a lot of traction on Twitter and Instagram recently, and I think part of that's due to their short-form social media, and people's attention spans seem to keep shrinking and shrinking by the day. You know, we don't even probably use 140 characters on Twitter. It's like 10, and that's it, usually just like a bit.ly. But I think to that point about platforms, we try to focus more on influencers and where are our influencers and what are the influencers doing and how can we get our message, you know, with video and photo as a fashion brand, you know, really being about the visualization of it and trying to create an emotional connection through visual, or whether that's video or photo. How can we work with, you know, vendors, partners, or even on our own to find, you know, power users wherever they may be, regardless of platform, and just try to reach them at their level instead of saying, well, we're going to focus on this one platform because it got written up in Adweek like 5 times in the last month, and everyone's saying they're going to monetize it next week. I mean, let's just cut that out right now, that none of this is going to be monetized to the benefit of, like, you know, the ROI our e-com partners or our business managers want to see anytime soon. And that's the conversation we have internally is, don't worry about revenue out of this. Let's worry about making connections with people. And I think to make connections, you can't dictate how you're going to connect. You just need to find those people that are going to give you the chance to spread your message.
I'll actually challenge that piece a little bit, because I think, you know, for us, social media is a business tool. And even, you know, for a brand like Tom's, we, you know, have a very emotional brand, and you know, we have this, we call it a movement, the one-for-one movement, but it's a business tool for us as well. So I think it really just depends, the platforms that you're on, it depends on the goals for your, you know, organization. And I think, you know, for a brand like Vans, it's like, for you guys to be like, F you, we're gonna be on like Instagram and Tumblr is so Vans, and that's exactly what you guys should be doing. And for guests, no, you are, I get it. And you know, for guests, it's having those influencer relationships is really important, and that's a different approach to take too. And I think for Tom's, we're on 12 different platforms. And each of them have a slightly different goal. Some of them we're really trying to build a one-to-one connection with people. I think Twitter is a really great platform for us. There's a lot of a community building aspect there. There's a lot of untapped potential in Google Plus with their communities, products that they have there in Hangouts. There's also a really great way to connect your fans, not only with you, but with each other as well. Pinterest is a great traffic driver for us. We use that one in that capacity. Facebook is just, you can't deny the global usership there, and that's just, I think when you're at a certain level of being a brand, that's a platform that you have to be on. Even now, when I'm looking up a new company or a new brand that I just heard about, I want to jump on their Facebook page and I want to see more photos about the products that they sell, or the types of people who are talking about it, or the types of people who are wearing their products. So, for brands like Tom's, we have the selling side of our business, we have the giving side of our business, and the emotional side of our business, and we're also really about building community and building a movement. So I think that's the reason why we're on 12 different platforms. But that's not necessarily right for every brand. I think it really depends on the goals and what you're trying to get out of social media, and how you're using social media to be, a business element of your greater company.
So the next question is like my favorite topic to talk about with all of you guys. And in fact, literally, Nikki and I had this discussion back in 2008, yeah, I know. And then Caitlin and and then Caitlin and Kyle, we talked about this last week, but more importantly, I emailed Caitlin this particular article because it was so a topic that we talk about all the time, which is, so Refinery 29 basically had posted an article about how during New York Fashion Week there were so many bloggers and influencers that were in the front row, and that it's kind of steering away from what the meaning is of New York Fashion Week. So the question that Refinery 29 had posed was, will we continue to see bloggers on the front row of New York Fashion Week moving forward? So the topic that I always discuss with these guys is outreach programs and influencer outreach programs, which is always a common topic, and it can often confuse a lot of people. As Caitlin was kind of saying, with Instagram followers, are you following them just because they have 22,000 followers on Instagram, or are you really kind of seeing that engagement? So I know what each of your guys' answers are, but for the audience, is an influencer outreach program necessary? And if so, what defines an influencer? And what do you guys look for, particularly in an influencer? And yeah, we did have this discussion.
Perhaps it changed. So as far as our influencers, maybe I have a really kind of brand-specific philosophy, I guess. I mean, like the son of the founder of our company literally goes and grills hot dogs for people at our events and shakes everybody's hand. And this dude's in his 60s, and he does not need to be doing that. But he does it because it's important to him. So my thing with social media is the same way. I try to, our goal is to be as close to one-to-one interactions with people, with all of our fans as we can, because I feel like they're all our ambassadors. So whether I'm going through and seeing, looking up, every time somebody's tagged Vans on Instagram and just liking their photo, they took the time to take a photo and took time out of their lives to say I love this. I love these ugly shoes. I have worn them to death. They have been with me for all this time, or I just got my first pair and I am so excited. And come on, for somebody to really care that much, to want to share that with me as a brand, the very least I can do is like it and say thank you. And so we try as hard as we can every day to get closer and closer to that one-to-one reaction to what our fans do. And yes, that does take a lot of time, but it's important. Specifically with what Denise is talking about, with bloggers and all that stuff. I think it is completely fun, and we definitely do it, especially when it comes to some of our elevated product and collaborations we do, some things that are more fashion forward. But to what Caitlin was saying, not everything needs to be on every different network, and so some things that we do with collaborators, influencers, I'm not putting that on our Facebook page because that doesn't make any sense for that demographic. Not everything needs to go everywhere. So that might be on our Tumblr because, our Tumblr, they like things that are a bit more fashion forward. So yes, both kinds of influencers are important in different ways.
I think Nikki made a great point, which is everybody's a potential influencer, and Caitlin was saying that earlier, that you really have to sort of look for that one-to-one connection. And I think the best example I can think of for guests was we just had somebody recently that had, to Nikki's point, this person had constantly taken photos of guest product, tagged us. They took one that was just better than some of the product photography we have, so we reposted it on Instagram, and the person actually took a screenshot of us reposting it from our wall and posted that, saying how excited they were. And then we were commenting, the community manager was commenting back and forth with them, and to me, that's a real true influencer. And I think to the question about bloggers, it really depends. I think it depends on your brand. I think it depends on what you're trying to do. And I always try to think of a larger context. What else do we have going on? How does this make sense? Is this just something we're doing in a vacuum because these people have a bunch of followers, or they happen to be doing something that's within the fashion sphere, and we saw BB or BCBG doing it, and so now we want to do it too? Because to me, that's not a real influencer program. You're not going to get very far, and people aren't stupid. They're going to see right through that. So I think the better way to go about it is to create that groundswell with your own community base, and then layer in, where it's appropriate in the larger context, influencers that match your brand filter. I think that's the other problem brands get caught in, is not looking at your own brand filter. You just say, this person is the it girl or the it blogger or the it influencer of the moment, so I'm going to use them. And then next thing you know, they've got like 50 other deals lined up right after you that are so close in competition that you're like, okay, well, I don't know what that did for me. So I think that authenticity, which I think was another big point that everybody's been raising, is also really key.
I agree with all of that 100%. And as far as identifying our own influencers, we ran a program this past year called Ticket to Give. It was actually the second iteration of it. But basically, we feel like the closest we can bring somebody to our brand is to send them out in the field and let them experience the giving side for themselves. And for employees of Tom's, after you've been with the company for a year, you get to go on a giving trip, and then it's every 3 years after that. So I've been on a couple trips, and it truly is one of the most amazing experiences, and especially when you work so hard for a brand, to be able to go see what you're doing. And to experience that and all the emotion that comes along with it is pretty powerful. And I think everybody comes back to the office feeling like we don't even scratch the surface on communicating to our customers what we really do. So this idea, Ticket to Give, came about where we decided we wanted to send customers on trips. And how can we make people those long-term, like lifelong ambassadors and influencers and advocates for our brand? So what we did is we created this kind of portal on our website where you could go and upload a couple of photos and a little paragraph about why you wanted to go on a giving trip. And you had to fill in a blank. It was like ticket to experience, or ticket to live my dreams, or ticket to whatever. You kind of identified yourself in that way. So there was kind of an entry period that lasted for about 5 weeks, and then it moved into a voting round. And what that did was, it made people like really fight hard to go on one of these trips. I mean, they were taking like iPads out and standing on their campus lawns and like asking strangers to sign up for a Tom's account so they could vote on their thing, and like, but that really helped us surface to the top who had the greatest social media reach, you know, who could really rally a ton of people to get behind something that they were doing for our brand. And so we took 50 winners out of that. We had like thousands of entries. We took 50 winners. The winners had, I think, like 3,000 votes each. And it wasn't like you just like log on and hit vote. It was like you actually had to create a Tom's account if you didn't have one, and sign in, find their entry, vote on them. So we really had a lot of people going very deep into our brand. And then I think trip number 3 just came back, or they'll come back this weekend. And then there's 2 more trips. So we did 5 trips of about 10 people. And what we're seeing is, as each trip comes back and they get their photos from their trip, and we made a little video for each person too, the engagement even on their own social media channels, I mean, people come out of the woodworks to like and share and comment and support these people who are now like lifelong advocates of our brand. And there's been an amazing amount of kind of localized PR, which is really great too. I think it's always easy to kind of think on the really big level and how can you get into the really big, you know, mass media markets, but also to get down on a local level, especially with a brand like Tom's that's so community-centric, has been really awesome. So definitely agree with there's value in working with real like influencers, people who have a high following. I mean, you're exposing your brand to a new audience. It's really important. We do it too. FTC guidelines, I have to say it, like, look into it if you don't know what I'm talking about, and be careful. Be careful, or close your ears and pretend like you never heard it. But there's some tricky things that you kind of have to be aware of in social media too. But so there's value in kind of influencers that are out there. You just have to find ones that are right for your brand, but also don't overlook your own community and what you can do to make them influencers in their own space as well.
So kind of continuing, Kyle, you recently had the whole, guest model search, right, earlier this year. That was, if you guys aren't familiar, I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with, like, the old guest models, like Claudia Schiffer and all that kind of stuff, but,
Not such a babe in this
Yeah. So, I mean, with the new generation, was that easy for someone to like kind of like understand, and like did you guys have to like kind of really use social media to make people understand like who a guest model was and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an education process, and it's very similar to what Caitlin was just talking about with Ticket to Give. Is you wanna find people that are also going to empower their networks. And so what we tried to do was give people those sort of emotional guidelines to what it means to be a guest girl, and then empower them to go get their networks to act on their behalf. So there was sort of the selfish reward of submitting yourself. And at that point, we were, educating people, using the archives, using all the old commercials and the video clips we could find to show people, what it means, to have these different traits of being young and sexy and adventurous, and what that means to be a guest girl. And then the really important part was then getting them to mobilize when we culled it down to, here are the people that Paul Marciano, the creative director, says, they could be in an ad, the top 100, the top 50, the top 25. And that was where it got really exciting, because then you're asking them to go ahead and mobilize their audiences. And I think that's where it became really interesting, because there's a dilemma sometimes, and I know there was when we talked about this, was there's always somebody that you want to win, but then the question becomes, how do you let your audience dictate, as far as you're willing to go? Because if you don't, if you go back on that promise, your audience will rebel. And I think that was a tricky line that we had to walk, especially when you're talking about somebody being a model. So I think it was, all in all, a very successful program that really helped us to take the brands to a new generation of people who maybe didn't realize how many people, I didn't even realize that, Naomi Campbell was a guest model, Claudia Schiffer, Adriana Lima, there were tons of them that were going through the archives, and I'm thinking, I didn't know half of these people. I knew Claudia, I knew Anna Nicole, that was it. So it was even an education process for someone like me, and I think that's what was really was powerful, was people getting to experience that all over again.
And Nikki, like for you guys with like Vans, you guys started off as a skate brand, right? And turned into this like multifaceted like super brand that like does like things like OTW and does things like Vans Warped Tour, and then like things like going to like South by, where you and I hang out at South by. Because a lot of you guys you're spread across like different like entities, Kyle, you and I, we talked about this, like guess you've got multiple, entities that you're dealing with. How do you kind of keep that consistency, I guess, like with the voice? Like I know, Caitlin, I know you guys use your employees a lot to kind of tell that kind of like voice. How do you kind of stay consistent across the board when you're that multifaceted?
I can't say that it's easy, but when it comes down to like how we talk to our audience, I divide things up into different voices. I'm not a skater. I love it. I am an armchair quarterback for all of our sports. I will drown if I get in the wrong kind of surf. So I know that I'm not the right person to be speaking to that audience, but I know the people that are, I think she's waving. Okay. I know the people that are the right voice. And so, I have a skater that writes for skate. I have a surfer that writes for surf. And, a pro BMX athlete that writes for our BMX channels. Then when it comes to our primary brand voice, I don't know. I just know it sounds right. I know who we are. I know that we're rooted in skateboarding. I know that, I know the things that we care about, because what's the best idea you can do? You hire your biggest fan. And I know the brand and I love it, and so does everybody else that I work with. And it's just one of those things, or you don't, you don't. You can't explain it. And that's how you just have to trust the people that you hire to have the right voice, and they'll do a good job.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is hiring people or finding people even within your organization that speak the brand voice. We hired a social media manager a few months ago, and he came from our store communications. He's been there since he was an intern, so he knows the brand inside and out. And now as a social media manager, not only does he know how to get things done, but at the same time, he knows exactly what's right and what's wrong. And then the second piece I would add to that is, I think Nikki would agree, not overthinking it. Social media is supposed to be a conversation. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be engaging. And so not pulling your hair out over grammatically how you're going to phrase something, or whether or not you're using the right adverbs, is something I stress to my team all the time, that it should be fun. It should come sort of free-flowing to you. And like Nikki said, if you have it, you have it. And if you don't, you don't. And that's where someone like one of us will step in and say, that's not right. But overall, it should be something that kind of just comes out of you because you believe in the brand.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what you said about hire your biggest fan. That's like the best safety that you can do. Hire somebody who loves what you're doing, believes in what you're doing, cares about it, lives and breathes it, and then that voice piece kind of happens. And yeah, sometimes it strays from that a little bit, but your audience is probably made up of a lot of different types of people too, especially those following you on social media. And something that we do with our brand is we try and really balance how much we're talking about ourselves and how much we're talking about our community. So if you have a community who is activating and they're talking about you a lot and they're posting photos on Instagram of wearing your shoes or wearing your product, use that. Like, we use user-generated content like it's going out of style. Like, it is so much a part of our content strategy, and really should be even more so. Extremely cost-effective, yeah. Exactly. So yeah, so it's like know who you are, but also share that voice with your community. I mean, I think you were talking about it earlier. It's like it's not just putting content out there, it's listening, and part of that listening is being able to share your voice with your community.
So, success. How do you define it? Is it ROI? I'm going to throw out a bunch of acronyms. ROI, KPIs, all that kind of stuff. So, how do you define what success means in social media?
Oh my God. That's, yeah. It's, I think, yeah, right? Yes, this is, you cannot, this info can't leave this frame. Well, it's changed a ton. I mean, I know that probably when we started, let's just say South by Southwest, maybe 5-6 years ago, everyone's talking about, oh, social media is like the new printing press. It's revolutionizing everything. It's amazing. And then cut back to us at the same table 6 years later. Everyone wants to know about ROI. I don't know how to do any of this. So I think when the rubber hits the road, we all got to sell something. And I think that when you are able to strike a balance between your product stories that does what you got to do, and it's ultimately why your fans want to be around you in the first place, don't forget that, when you can strike a balance between that and the stories that you want to tell that makes that emotional connection, that's when you really are, that's what success is. When you can see that people are really sticking with you and the stories that you're telling, and that's, your audiences are continuing to grow and your business is growing. It's hard to quantify that emotion. We're all, I know the three of us work with a lot of people who definitely think that they have a formula they want us to buy to believe that they can do all that. But as far as we know, nobody's come up with that magic number yet. But I think, I think we're all struggling. You got some ideas? Let me know.
I think that's right. There's no formula yet. There's an education process I think that we all probably deal with, which is, this is kind of like TV in 1955. Everybody knows how big it is and that it's not going away. Nobody's really quite sure what impact it's having on a one-to-one level. So when we look at it now at Guess, the first thing we said is, okay, and I think each brand is different. We already had 5 million-ish fans on Facebook. We had a sizable following. It was less about getting more fans into the funnel, and it was more about how do we activate more of them. If we can show that we're activating more of them in the social channel, that means what we're talking about, what we're sharing, what we're hearing is working. And then if we can get more of them over to our websites or into our stores, that's the ultimate goal. And looking at it like that relay race of our job is to get more people aware of the brand, which Guess sometimes doesn't have that problem. We need to get more people that are aware into one of our stores or our websites. And then at that point, we have to hand the baton over to our e-com team, our merchandisers, our store associates to say, okay, we got them here for you. Now make sure they have a great experience and buy something. And then we'll catch them on the back way when they talk about how great their experience was and what they bought. So I think every brand's different. I think it's an education and sort of level setting expectations to say, you know, if this is our goal as a brand, then this is what social media is going to do for us. And it's going to be different for all of us. And it could be even different by season, by campaign. I think that's the beauty of social media, is that because there's no true way to define its value yet, you can define it a lot of different ways. It just comes down to having a point of view and then sticking to that, regardless of, you know, how many bean counters want to tell you that, you know, for every $1 you're putting in, I better see 3 back.
Everything Kyle just said, plus I would add to that, getting your community to defend you. So one of the major points of success that I love to see through our social media is when somebody, I love when this happens, when somebody posts on our Facebook page, like, so we sell eyewear now. So for those of you who maybe don't know, we sell shoes as our first product. For every pair of shoes you purchase, we give a pair to a child in need. We launched eyewear in 2011. For every pair of sunglasses you purchase, we help restore sight for a person in need. So, and that's for like cataract surgery or medical treatment or prescriptive glasses. So I love when somebody posts on our Facebook page, oh, so I'm gonna buy a pair of sunglasses, you're gonna give some kid in Africa a pair of sunglasses, why does he need a pair of sunglasses? Like, and then like 5, I love when that happens, it happens all the time. Like 5 of our fans will rush to that and comment back, no, they actually help restore sight for a person. And here's how they do it. It's through one of these 3 ways: medical treatment, prescription glasses, or through cataract surgery. And it's like, boom, what we're doing is working. Like, that's working.
Something like, hey, asshole.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But right, but when you, it's like I log on to my other account with a different name, and I jump in and say, hey, you asshole. No, I'm just kidding. But never happened. It's never happened. But that is really social media success. When you've turned you've taken them from the awareness, all the way from the awareness side of the spectrum, all the way over to they're willing to defend you. I think that's a huge, huge measure of success.
Cool. So I'm going to open up to Q&A to the audience. So if you guys have a question, come on up here and feel free to ask our panelists a question. Oh, what? Come on. Yeah. Come over.
You could probably just
Yeah. No. Sorry.
must come up.
Yeah.
Okay. So, as you guys were saying, my name is Perry. Hello. I work in social. I work in social media at Team One, an ad agency based in El Segundo. My question is, as we know, social media is constantly evolving. There are constantly new sites and different platforms emerging. I'm curious what your guys' approach is to jumping on these new sites and how important it is to you guys to be an early adapter. Or do you, because there's a wide array, and like Vine is great in some senses, but realistically now with Instagram video and whatnot, like it might not last. So how do you approach that?
We try everything. Like, I downloaded some stupid thing the other day that just made noise. It was like, all it did was like, through the air, and it makes a lot of noise. I'm like, this is completely useless, but I tried it. And so you never know what you're gonna run into. And plus, like some things you could end up using as a tool instead of like an actual social network. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about Vine right now, because yeah, you're right, Perry. With how well Insta Video's done, Vine is just a totally different thing and a totally different audience. I mean, if you think about the same with YouTube and Vimeo, you don't put the same content on it, but it's important to do both. So you might end up finding a network that you could use to do something. To help you achieve some goal more as a tool than thinking about it like, oh, I'm gonna grow this to be like 1 million followers. You might not need to.
Yeah, I would actually say the do part of what Nikki said is really important. So there's a tendency when something comes along that's new to just jump on it, and everybody wants to be an early adopter, but we always try to stop and ask ourselves that question, like, what are we going to do with this before we actually get on there? Because I do think what Nikki said about testing things is right. It's just a matter of, before you even test, you have to put together a solid test to say, okay, I think this is what this is going to do for me, so let's try that and let's see what happens. So we typically take, I wouldn't say like jump on it right away, but we'll typically, personally, like Nikki was saying, you download it, you kind of maybe play with it a little bit, and then come to the table with, hey, I was playing with this the other day, I think I have an idea, we could try to test something. But I'd much rather do something right than just necessarily do it first and do it horribly wrong or have the audience react horribly negatively to it.
Yeah, I'd say for the first few years in social media, I'd always kind of say like, oh, well, we're not a technology brand. People don't expect us to be an early adopter. So that was kind of my excuse for why we didn't like jump on the bandwagon on things. But that's an excuse. I mean, we're in social media, accept it, try new things. You should be the one, being able to say, yeah, I actually downloaded that 2 months ago. Here's what I've really liked about it. Here's what I haven't. When somebody from, your leadership team or somebody else comes to you and says like, why aren't we doing something on Vine? It's like, yeah, no, I'm already all on top of it, or exactly, yeah, yes. So, I mean, if you're in social media, you've signed up for it. So you kind of, you have to be that early adopter. You have to jump on those platforms and try them out and see what works. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if you don't have a story to tell there and you don't have the bandwidth for it, don't fight it.
Anyone else have a question? Come on down. Yeah, unfortunately, the chorus.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny. I'm from Instagram, which you guys will get a fun prize later. But my question to you guys is, you guys obviously heard about the Instagram advertising. And how do you guys plan on, leveraging that, and what are your thoughts on it?
With advertising, I think there's a delicate balance. I think Facebook on the whole has learned a lot probably from Facebook advertising, and so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here, and that they're going to put a lot of those learnings into place with Instagram. So we'll see. I think it can be used in spurts the right way. I think where you run into trouble is when you try to use it as a crutch or a catch-all for, this is going to solve all my problems. Because again, like we've talked about, lots of the ROI, it's not there yet. I'm not saying it can't get there, but just throwing money at a problem typically doesn't help solve it. So I would say for guests, we're probably going to experiment with it when it's available to us. We'll probably try to experiment with it in a way that we have something really important to talk about that's going to make our audience feel like it's not invasive, that we're not just trying to put 10 messages in front of them, that we're actually trying to show them something that we really feel is compelling.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think it's, again, something that we'd probably test, and it's a delicate balance. I think Instagram as a platform and as a group are a little bit more resistant to the whole full-blown advertising thing like Facebook is, so that'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out now that they're part of Facebook. But yeah, it's totally a delicate balance, and I think if it's anything like Facebook advertising where you can do such highly targeted and segmented tests, I mean that's something when we started advertising on Facebook, and it's been pretty recent for us. It's kind of, I really hate Facebook on advertising, so if I exclude, my age group and maybe a little bit younger and a little bit older, then maybe I'm protecting that audience from thinking, one thing, but the 35-year-olds and up, they don't care about the advertising on Facebook, and they click through and they buy stuff, so it's great. It meets that ROI number that keeps everybody else happy over there, so I can do all the cool stuff I want to do over here. So it's you kind of got to balance it, and at the end of the day, it is, like I said earlier, it's a business tool, so.
Cool. Anyone else have any other questions? Come on down.
I'm Jeff, and I run a small digital ad agency, so we do SEO, PPC, web design, some social for small businesses. And my question is, how do you find the influencers that you're talking about? And I'm thinking more new versus, maybe people who are, because you have millions of fans, So how do you find them? And then also, like, what's your approach to kind of reach out to them to get them involved with the brand? Like, what's your best approach that you find works best, if there is one?
Do you guys have a picture or something when you guys target these people?
Depending on the, going back to the two kinds of influencers that we talked about, if you're talking about audience or, your celebrity blogger, like that crew. You know what I do? I go on Twitter and see who's tweeting at us. It's crazy. It works. It's crazy. And then, like, after a while, if you're on there all the time, yeah, you're just like, oh, hey, yeah, I talk to you all the time. Yeah, you retweet me every single day. It's really just that simple. It really is. But yeah, if you're talking about, the other set of, tastemakers and that whole gang, if you don't know that, then you should know to ask someone else.
Yeah, I mean, what she said, I think the simplest approach is just to say hello, and comment on whatever they're commenting on, or follow them if there's something that they've done with your product or with your brand that's interesting, and people recognize that. I don't think there's a magic formula, and I don't think you need to overthink it. It's like walking up to somebody on the street that you find interesting and saying hello. The worst thing that happens is they don't say anything back.
Anyone else have any questions?
I'm Jonathan. I work in social media. I guess for you guys, you guys talk a lot about the one-to-one communication and advocates and everything. I guess it's more of a question of, as especially going forward. I mean, when you have all these advocates and they mention you on a weekly basis and everything, and then you kind of mention them back, and then how do you continue to have that relationship with the advocates if there's any particular tool sets? How do you, if guards change, how do you know that there's still an advocate a year from now or 2 years from now? Or if they stop being an advocate, what's the particular reason? How is it that you can kind of keep track of that or keep in communication with them? If employees change, how do you pass on that advocate list? I know you have your 50, but how do you kind of keep that momentum going and making sure that you're keeping those relationships with your strongest advocates?
I would say we were talking about social media platforms a little bit earlier before we started, and I think that there still aren't a lot of great tools out there to manage those types of things in social media. I think it's really tricky because of all of the privacy settings across different social media platforms not having an open API where different tools could be built to even scrape that data. So I think it's for people who work in it, it's man, it would be so incredibly valuable to have that. But it's just social media being in its infancy. Those kind of tools really don't exist unless you get up to an enterprise level and you have something like a Salesforce or a really thorough, CRM that's really expensive and a very, heavy integration with your web development, So it's you have either that scale or you have the scale of really just being in it as an individual person, as simple as we were saying, just having that one-to-one conversation. There's not really a great mix of options in between, at least that I've found.
One for a tool like that for small business. I bet you guys have used it too. Just as far as being practical, if anybody just wants some practical advice, if you got a small thing to deal with around here. I really like Hootsuite. It's a really basic tool. It's cheap. It works. I like TweetDeck for other things. But as far as what you're talking about specifically, Jonathan, with keeping up with people, I found that was really helpful in just being able to drag it over to a list real quick. It's easy, and it's down and dirty. It does the job, and it's cheap.
Okay, so before I forget, you guys, our sponsors have actually provided us with some great giveaways for tonight. So if you haven't had a chance, please tweet to #SMOpods. So we have some really awesome prizes, which our sponsors will talk about after I wrap up the last two questions that I have for you guys, which is, what's the biggest challenge and issues that you guys face in your positions?
We were just talking about this before. My biggest problem is globalization and just with social, because I got all these people that speak all these different languages all over the place. And going back to our one-to-one thing, guess what? I don't speak any of the Chinese languages, and it's really hard to find someone who speaks the right brand voice and can speak Mandarin and Cantonese. And I mean, this is just really hard stuff. Because you want to find someone who really gets you, and who who can literally, like, you want to have that local voice. You want to have people like there in that in that person's hometown, and being able to talk to them about the cat in the tree, or the whatever is happening that's a big old global event. And so that's where I'm having the hardest time right now. But it's also a really fun challenge.
That's definitely one, and I would say education is the other. Social media is one of those things that everybody thinks if they have a Twitter profile or an Instagram profile that they also can serve as creative director of social media and come to you on a daily, hourly, minute-by-minute basis with every single idea under the sun. Pretty much. I mean, we were talking about this earlier, and I think it really is one of those things where the best thing you can do is just continue to arm yourself with knowledge, tools that can help you, analyze. There's a science behind the art, as much as people hate that because it takes their crazy idea about the cat in the tree out of context. I think that's really probably one of the bigger challenges, is trying to educate people that what you're doing is based on audience behavior and not just creative whims.
Globalization, internal education, two greatest challenges.
Any last recommendations, thoughts for the audience?
I would just say keep it simple, do less things better. Try to build up small wins that can show movement and progress, instead of trying to go for the most out-of-the-box innovative thing right out of the gate. I think that's one of the things that I know I struggled with right away, is the tendency to want to do really innovative things in social media right away, instead of, to use a football analogy as an Ohio State Buckeye, like the blocking and the tackling. Do those things, focus on one objective that can get you a few small wins in a row, and then that'll help with your education that we were just talking about, because people will start to see those small wins build up over time, and they'll be willing to help you invest more in what you need to get things done.
Final words be for social media. I think it's, social media is a really fun place to work, like a fun space to work within, and especially when you get to interact with other people who really get where you're coming from. But I think it's like, let go of trying to convince people outside of those who work in the day-to-day of what it really means. Like, there's so much detail that I think we feel like is so important in the execution of all of this, that like your leadership team doesn't really care about, your marketing team doesn't really care about, your sales team doesn't really care about. Like, you be the expert on it, have your geeky conversations with your other social media people who get it, but don't ever expect, people outside of your social media team to get it on the level that you do. So you kind of have to step out of it and think on a on a higher level, broader view of what social media is, to try to explain it to people. And otherwise, you're just gonna like wear yourself out trying to explain it. Not coming from personal experience or anything, just kind of like a thought.
Okay, so riffing off of that a little bit, trying to communicate to other people what to do. Figure out a simple report that you can make, if it's once a month or if it's only once a quarter. Figure that out so that the people that don't speak our language can see what these numbers are and compare it to other stuff. Like, hey, look at Beyonce's Tumblr. Everybody knows who Beyonce is, like person in the, that I'm talking to. Okay, here's where we are compared to Beyonce. Contextualize things for people so that they can understand it, because they want to, they don't want to be dumb. It's really it's about education, and everybody wants to get where you're coming from, and it's only going to help you. Other than that, I would say when it comes to practically just posting stuff, say it out loud before you publish it. If you sound like hashtag dork, hashtag Friday, hashtag sale, hashtag $59.99, that doesn't sound good. That's not a conversation you want to have. No, oh my God, these people that work for me, hashtag boatneck tea the other day. Hashtag boatneck tea, come on. So we had to have a little talk about that. Emerging markets. That's it.
All right.
It's the big t-shirt neck. That does not need a hashtag.
If you want to follow the conversation around
The answer to that is hashtag nobody cares.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, thank you, you guys, for coming out tonight and presenting to everyone tonight. We have a few words from our sponsors.
Hey, thanks again to you guys. It's such a great event tonight. Earlier I drank and I just couldn't remember anything on an empty stomach. So now that I have a moment of clarity, I'm just going to do this right. I forgot to thank our sponsors. It's spits across it. If you got, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm being honest. So look, thank you again. Another round of applause. So, with that said, I'm going to do it right this time. Our sponsors, Spitz, amazing Mediterranean food across the street. They supplied the hummus and chips. Tech Zulu, they're here streaming this live on their site. Castagram, you'll hear from them in just a second. Fickle is one of the sponsors. That's their new restaurant that just opened up off Central and First. Great food, great dinner, great environment. There's Cafe Dolce, who did the bacon donuts. If you guys haven't had it, please try it. It's great. It's amazing. Jelly donuts, green tea donuts, everything. Everything's just great. Spitz again, for whatever reason. Laura. Yeah, I'm like Laura. Yeah, that's daytime, nighttime. Buzzsmith, Denise, their whole team is here. They put this panel together, and I believe they did just an amazing job. Opods, us, thank you. Thank me. Japangelis, Japangelis is a community brand out here. They're a local streetwear brand. Roy is somewhere around here. I think he's hiding from me because I was going to point him out. Maybe not. But if you guys had a great time tonight, please Facebook, tweet, retweet. If you guys had a horrible time, have any criticisms, email me directly. Don't let anyone know. So with that much said, we have some prizes. I'm not too familiar with how it worked out. I think it had something to do with who did the most tweets, who did the most likes, or whatever it may be. Maybe we can have. I think Laura could explain it the best. Yeah.
So Laura,
No.
if you guys want, she'll contact you from Buzzsmith's account and she'll.
Well, yeah. Let's do this. We'll do. We have one of our sponsors, Castagram, who I believe, if you weren't informed, they're giving away $15 coupons or gift codes to their site, and I think Jenny could explain it best. So Jenny?
Hi again. So speaking of telling your story, pretty much, do you have the video? Oh, no, that's okay. You guys can go on, everybody on your Instagram, find us at Keystagram. So speaking of telling your story, what we are is we're a platform where you can use your Instagram and your Facebook.
Thanks, Jenny. So we do have a raffle. Initially, I was told that people would put in their business cards in a bowl. That didn't happen. I'm really confused. I'm not sure how this is going to happen. We have a few prizes. I swear, it's good. Someone needs to explain it to me. Denise? Oh, really? Okay. Okay. Well, let me tell you the prizes. Castagram's going to donate 4 $35 gift cards, so you can use it on their site to build these cool cases. If you took a photo tonight, you could put it on a case and show everyone how cool it was. Another one we have is with Fickle. We have a $25 gift certificate to their dinner, so you could take your significant other or whatever it may be. Japangelis has donated a t-shirt, some stickers, a snapback. It's worth, I think, about $60. So it's very cool. It comes in small, so be sorry if it doesn't fit you, or you could go complain. you can go back to Roy and exchange it. And we're donating. We're donating an express pass. So what that is 1 month of membership. Sorry, wait, I take that back. It's not 1 month every day. It's the 10-day express pass. So I know a lot of you are employed, but if you have a friend, we'll transfer it. Let us know.
If you lose your job.
Yeah, if you lose your job, come to us. We'll take care of you. And I think that's it. Please another round. They're great. One last thing, networking, we'll do it up there, and at the end of the night, I think a few people are heading over to the Far Bar. Great place. Thanks so much, guys.